Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Let me apologize for our late start. I know that we came for 6 o'clock, and we should have started at 6. So my apologies. We will begin with the national anthem. So we'll invite Mr. Given Isaac to render the national anthem. Please stand.
Yes, I've tried my best. Sorry for a little mix-up. Try my best.
Thank you. Please remain standing for the invocation. Mr. Hanley.
Oh, dear precious, kind, loving, and eternal Father, as we come before thee this day, we give thee thanks for waking us up, for the beautiful sunshine, for the air that we breathe. We thank thee for the freedom of expression that we as a people of this country have. We thank thee for the opportunity to express our faith, our belief, our thought without hindrance. In that freedom, we pray, Father, that there's accountability as we speak, that we lift, we educate, we strengthen, so that we can move in the same direction. We pray thy blessing be upon those who have organized this gathering. Bless the efforts. The program, the thought that Dr. Gill will provide us tonight would be inspiring. Inspiring for us to search within ourselves and recognize that we, as the reggae hymn will say, can free ourselves from mental slavery. The mental slavery of unfortunate and sadness. We are grateful for thy Son, Jesus Christ, that makes all things possible. May he bless at this time this gathering, and the intention may be fulfilled according to his will, and in his name, even Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated. Let me begin again by saying good afternoon and welcome to the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant Inaugural Emancipation Lecture. We would like to acknowledge the presence of the following: the Registrar of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, Mrs. Carissa Kelly, the Director of Human Resources, Ms. Elise Milliat, the Dean of the Technical and Vocation and Management Studies, Mr. Terry Hanley, Director of the Library Services, Mrs. Sonita Daniel, our keynote speaker, Dr. Cameron Gill, former Chair of the Clarence Fitzroy Board of Governors, Dr. Susan Owen, Professor Emeritus Jessica Byron, Interim President of the UWI Alumni Association of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Nigel Brown. Head Acting of the UWI Global Campus, Miss Sandra Isaac. I see with us also the former principal of the CFBC, Mrs. Marilyn Rogers. Good afternoon and welcome all. I would like to say that for us as a people, it is our first Emancipation lecture. And because it is our first Emancipation lecture, I am quite pleased with our numbers, and I recognize that they're growing as we go along. And I would like to say to you, thank you for coming. It is always a pleasure to have with us the young people and also those whose backs we stand on today. So welcome. I would also like to invite the Director of Library Services, Mrs. Daniel, to do the welcome remarks, and that will be followed by Mrs. Carissa Kelly, the Registrar of the CFBC, who will give official remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. I adopt the protocol that has been so ably established by Ms. Laverne M. Brooks, our Business Development Officer. But permit me, permit me to acknowledge the presence of Mrs. Carissa Kelly, the Registrar of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College, who currently has oversight of the college. And also to recognize Dr. Sarah Owen, past chair of the Board of Governors, and Mrs. Marilyn Rogers, former principal of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College. And also our keynote speaker, Dr. Cameron Gill. On behalf of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College, it is an absolute honor to welcome you to the launch of our inaugural annual Emancipation Observance. When we think of a college library, we often picture quiet study corrals and shelves of books. But this evening, we saw that the library is also a significant part of our college's cultural and intellectual life. A living sanctuary where history is preserved, interrogated, and celebrated. Today, we stand on the shoulders of ancestors whose courage secured our freedom. This lecture series was born out of our conviction that emancipation must never be reduced to a quiet paragraph in a history book, but must remain an active, ongoing conversation about who we are and where we are headed as a Caribbean people. We have prepared a full experience for you, from the ancestral rhythms of local drumming by the Spirit Drummers, courtesy of the Department of Cultural Heritage, to our Emancipation exhibition on the balcony, and now what promises to be a powerful feature presentation by Dr. Cameron Gill. We are deeply grateful for your presence. Whether you are joining us in person here in the Poinciana Conference Room or tuning in via our digital stream, your participation makes this community gathering complete. To officially open this historic lecture series and to share the significance of this national initiative by the only indigenous tertiary level institution in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. It is now my distinct privilege to invite Mrs. Carissa Kelly, our college registrar, to the podium to launch this inaugural event. Ladies and gentlemen, students and other youths, please join me in welcoming our college registrar.
Good evening. Excellent. The established protocol having been observed, on behalf of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College's Board of Governors, administration, staff, students, I warmly welcome you to our inaugural Emancipation Lecture. I also convey special greetings on behalf of our interim president, Dr. Moira Rotham, who is currently out of office and away from the Federation. Indeed, this evening is monumental. A new page has been etched in CFBC's history as we proudly launch our inaugural Emancipation Lecture. While the official observance of Emancipation Day has passed, the significance and lessons of emancipation continue to resonate. Accordingly, as the National College of St. Kitts and Nevis, we are sincerely gratified to create a space where scholarship, history, culture, and public dialogue converge to deepen our understanding of the past while inspiring us to shape a more just and prominent future. Certainly, emancipation represents far more than a historical event. It commemorates the abolition of slavery and honors the steadfast courage, indomitable resilience, profound sacrifice, and unwavering hope of our ancestors who struggle, secured freedoms that many of us enjoy today. In the words of our interim president, and I quote, "Emancipation did not end when the chains were broken. It began when a once subjugated people were called to imagine themselves as authors of their own future. Our ancestors understood that freedom without unity could be weakened and freedom without purpose reduced to symbolism. The challenge before us, therefore, is not to simply rise from oppression, but to rise above mistrust, individualism, and indifference that can cause a free people to remain inwardly confined. In this continuing work, CFBC has a vital role to preserve historical truth, cultivate critical thought, and prepare citizens who can convert inherited freedom into shared progress. To honor our ancestors is not merely to remember the struggle that secured our freedom, but to exercise the freedom collectively, intelligently, courageously, and purposefully." End of quote. As we gather this evening, and in addition to the highly anticipated keynote address that will be delivered by our distinguished colleague, Dr. Cameron Gale, I invite us to each reflect personally on the meaning of freedom. Beyond our shared history, may we also ask ourselves whether we are truly free from those bondage that seek to oppress or constrain us mentally, politically, financially, socially, and even spiritually. Emancipation challenges us not only to remember the past, but to also pursue personal growth, justice, liberation in our own lives and communities. It is our sincere hope that this lecture will become a cherished annual tradition, one that fosters meaningful dialogue, celebrates our heritage, and inspire future generations to appreciate the enduring legacy of emancipation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my distinct honor and privilege to declare the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College's inaugural Emancipation Lecture officially open. May this inaugural lecture serve not merely as an event on our calendar, but as the beginning of a lasting institutional tradition that honors our past while inspiring generations yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Daniel and Mrs. Kelly. And the moment that you are waiting for, but we must do a little introduction of our keynote speaker. Dr. Cameron Gill is an archaeologist, heritage scholar, historian, and senior lecturer in history and Caribbean studies at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College, a native of Irishtown, Bastia, St. Kitts, and a proud graduate of the Bastia High School. Dr. Gill has dedicated his career to advancing the understanding, preservation, and promotion of history and cultural heritage in St. Kitts and Nevis and the wider Caribbean. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts in History with a minor in Archaeology with honors and a Master's of the Arts with distinction in Heritage Studies from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus, Barbados. His master's research examined Barbados's maritime heritage through the lens of material culture. In 2020, he earned a doctorate of philosophy, PhD, in archaeology from Leiden University in the Netherlands, where his doctoral research explored the historical archaeology of the port and anchorage of Sandy Point, St. Kitts. Dr. Gill has served in several distinguished professional roles throughout his career. He is a former history and social studies teacher at the Immaculate Conception School and also served as the UNESCO World Heritage Site Manager and the UNESCO National Focal Point for St. Kitts and Nevis, playing a pivotal role in heritage conservation and the advancement of the Federation's cultural agenda. In addition to his academic responsibilities, Dr. Gill is the principal archaeological heritage and historical research consultant at CamGill Consulting. Through the firm, he has successfully led archaeological, heritage, and historical research projects for a range of national and international organizations, including the Ministry of Agriculture, the Embassy of the Republic of China, Taiwan, the Department of Environment, and the Nevis World Heritage Committee. An accomplished researcher and author, Dr. Gill's scholarship focuses on Caribbean history, historical archaeology, maritime heritage, colonial fortification, and cultural resource management. His research has contributed significantly to the documentation and preservation of the Federation's historical landscape. He is the co-author with the Foundation for Maritime Archaeology in Curacao of The Next to the Sea Are Many Fine Cannons, a publication based on the findings of his doctoral archaeological investigations. Dr. Gill is an active member of several distinguished professional organizations, including the Association of Caribbean Historians, the Royal Netherlands Institute of South Asian and Caribbean Studies, and the Institute of Historical Research at the University of London. At the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College, Dr. Gill serves as senior lecturer and course coordinator for Cape Caribbean History and Caribbean Studies, where he is widely respected for his engaging teaching, scholarly leadership, and commitment to inspiring students to appreciate the rich history, heritage, identity of St. Kitts and Nevis and the Caribbean region. Now, for the moment. The topic is Rise Up Together or Sink Separately, Lessons from Our Ancestors. Please help me welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Cameron Gill.
Good evening, all. Thank you both to Mrs. Kelly and Ms. Brooks, such as a wonderful introduction. Protocol having already been established, allow me first to say how honored I am to deliver the inaugural Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College Emancipation Lecture. It is fitting that such a lecture should be held at CFBC because a college is not only a place where we deliver formal higher education. It is a place where we shape memory, sharpen judgment, and prepare citizens to face the world with knowledge, courage, and purpose. The title of this lecture is Rise Up Together or Sink Separately, Lessons from Our Ancestors. This title asks us to look backward and forward at the same time. It asks us to look backward to the long, painful, creative, heroic struggle of African and African-descended people against enslavement. But it also asks us to look forward to the Caribbean we are building now and to the dangers we face if we mistake political independence for real security or cultural pride for collective action. Emancipation is often treated as a date. We remember 1st August 1834. We remember 1838, when apprenticeship ended in most of the British Caribbean. We remember the legal ending of slavery. But emancipation was never simply a date on the calendar. Emancipation was a process. It was a struggle. It was a demand. It was a refusal. It was a war of memory, labor, culture, religion, family, language, flight, revolt, survival, and imagination. And this evening, I want to argue that one of the greatest lessons of emancipation is this. Our ancestors did not inherit unity. They created it. They created unity under conditions designed to make unity impossible. They created community in a world that separated them. They created language where communication was restricted. They created religion where their spiritual systems were mocked, criminalized, or forced underground. They created family under a system that sold children from parents, husbands from wives, brothers from sisters. They created resistance where every law, every whip, every auction block, every plantation bell, and every militia was designed to teach submission. If they could create unity under those conditions, what excuse do we have today? This is the question at the heart of this lecture. Are we going to rise up together or are we going to sink separately? Now, let us begin with a difficult issue. It is an issue often raised in discussions of enslavement and the Atlantic slave trade. It is the claim that Africans were disunited, that Africans betrayed one another, that some African rulers and merchants participated in the sale of captives into the African trade. Some people raise this point as historical inquiry. Others raise it as an accusation. Others still raise it as a way of reducing European responsibility, as if African participation in the trade somehow cancels out European ships, European capital, European forts, insurance, guns, plantation systems, and European imperial law. We must be honest about history. Yes, some African kingdoms, rulers, merchants, and intermediaries participated in aspects of the Atlantic slave trade. The trade drew on war, kidnapping, judicial punishment, debt, pawning, and existing forms of servitude, and it transformed them into a massive Atlantic system of racialized chattel slavery driven by plantation demand in the Americas. But honesty must not be confused with distortion. There was no modern Pan-African identity in the 15th, 16th, 17th, or 18th centuries. People did not think of themselves primarily as African in the modern political sense. They identify themselves through kingdoms, towns, lineages, religious communities, languages, ethnic groups, occupations, and political alliances. Modern Pan-Africanism emerged much later, especially in late 19th and early 20th century, with figures such as Henry Sylvester Williams and the 1900 Pan-African Conference in London. Therefore, to accuse pre-colonial Africans of betraying Pan-African identity that did not yet exist is historically unfair. It is like accusing medieval Europeans of betraying the European Union. It is like accusing ancient peoples of violating modern nationalism. It takes an identity forged later through suffering, diaspora, racism, anti-colonial struggle, and black internationalism, and projects it backwards onto societies that understood themselves differently. This does not excuse participation in the slave trade. It contextualizes it. It also forces us to ask a broader question. Why is African division treated as a unique moral failure? History is full of people fighting alongside outsiders against people who, from our modern perspective, look like their own. Scottish, Welsh, and Irish clans fought both with and against English power. Those clans that fought on the side of the English would form the origins of the present-day Scottish, Irish, and Welsh regiments of the British Army. Likewise, some local groups fought for the Roman Empire, while others resisted Rome. Indigenous people in the Americas formed alliances both with and against European colonizers, often for reasons rooted in older rivalries, survival, diplomacy, or immediate threat. Much more recently, within living memory actually, in Nazi-occupied Europe, some individuals and groups resisted fascism with extraordinary courage, while a greater number, something that only recently historians began examining, collaborated with the Nazi regime against neighbors, countrymen, and even relatives. For example, Nina Siegel's book, The Diary Keepers, World War II in the Netherlands. Now, in using this example, I want you all to pause for a second, right? Turn and look at the person sitting next to you, just for a second. Now, imagine, this is not 2026 at the Point Center conference room at CFBC. Imagine this is a lecture hall at a Dutch university, okay? And we are a bunch of Jewish scholars meeting. Within 5 years, 1 out of every 3 people here right now would be dead, and not from natural causes or not from old age, okay? So in Ms. Siegel's book, she examines the complicity of many Europeans in turning over their fellow countrymen to the Nazis. Another fascinating example is Olaf Reed Alston's book, 2 Eggs on My Plate. Let me give a backstory about this book, about my personal history of this book. My parents were not rich, but what they were rich in was a library with extensive books. So that made me a bookworm from an early age. And there was a book I came across in a library, 2 Eggs on My Plate, by Olaf Reed Alston, which was a very fascinating text. Unfortunately, it was either during Gilbert or Hugo, I can't remember which one. Some of the books were damaged by a hurricane, and that was one of them that was lost. I literally spent most of my adult life looking for that book. And 3 years ago, I found it on an online bookseller that specialized in rare and out-of-print books. So I bought it immediately. But here's where the book is relevant to the point I'm making. Olaf Reed Alston fled Norway when the Nazis invaded and made his way to Britain like many of his countrymen. He was trained by the British for covert operations and then parachuted into Norway to conduct clandestine espionage against the Nazis. The book is fascinating because not only accounts his exploits, but he even took photographs. So they photographed the camouflage tent in the forest that he used to spy on the Nazis, photographs of the fjords that he photographed, etc. But here is where the book is relevant to our point. One of Olaf's biggest fear during his clandestine activities was being betrayed by one of his fellow countrymen, by a suspicious countryman. That was the fear always at the back of his mind. So there's one passage in the book where he's going to visit his parents' farm, okay? You may argue that it's reckless, but no matter how well trained you are, you're a human being still. So he missed his family going to visit them. And his big fear was that the family in the neighboring farm would see him and report it. Now, this is not because of any beef between the two families. They got along well. But the fear of betrayal by one of our countrymen or neighbors was always present, okay? Now, while you may not have heard of these two books I just mentioned, most of you would have heard, certainly heard of the SS units of the Second World War. SS, short for Shoot, Shots, Fell, these were infamous for their ruthlessness in implementing the policies of Nazism. However, what most Europeans don't like to talk about up to the present day is that in addition to the now well-known German SS, there were also Latvian, Ukrainian, and Dutch SS divisions, which committed unspeakable atrocities against their fellow countrymen. So betrayal is not an African trait. Collaboration is not an African trait. Disunity is not an African trait. These are human possibilities under conditions of fear, ambition, coercion, rivalry, and survival. What is especially dangerous is the way the story is often told. African participation in the slave trade is highlighted, but African resistance is minimized. African complicity is repeated, but African opposition is forgotten. So the African rulers, communities, and individuals who resisted slave trading, resisted European intrusion, challenged kidnapping, protected refugees, or attempted to regulate or oppose the trade, have too often been pushed to the margins of public memory. This imbalance is not accidental. It serves a purpose. It allows the European descendants of empire to say they sold themselves, instead of saying we built a world system on their suffering. It allows the Atlantic slave trade to be reduced to a moral failure inside Africa, rather than understood as an international system of violence, profit, and racial capitalism. At the same time, these descendants of empire downplay the role their own ancestors played in collaborating with evil regimes such as Hitler's Third Reich, and act as if all their grandparents were part of the anti-Nazi resistance or just innocent bystanders. One recent example I would give. There was a controversy a couple of years ago involving the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada under the administration of Justin Trudeau. Her maternal grandfather was from Poland, and during the Nazi occupation, he was a pro-Nazi journalist. Now, when this was first released in the media, she denied it, even though there is evidence that she knew about this for several decades now. So she tried to deny it until The Guardian, one of the UK's most respected newspapers, did an investigative piece on it, okay? So we are being reminded about the fact that our ancestors took part in the slave trade centuries ago. But there are many people walking around today in Canada, the UK, the Netherlands, France, etc., who have fascist skeletons in their closet from a much more recent history. So bear that in mind, okay? And yet, even if we face the uncomfortable fact of African participation in the slave trade, we must ask, what did the enslaved do after capture? Did they remain divided forever? Did they accept the identities imposed on them? Did they surrender to the logic of the plantation? No. The Caribbean became one of the great laboratories of forced separation, but also one of the great laboratories of human recreation. Africans were brought to the Caribbean from different regions, kingdoms, cultures, and language communities. On plantations, enslavers often tried to prevent communication and organization by mixing people of different backgrounds. The aim was simple. If people could not speak easily to one another, they would find it harder to organize, resist, revolt, preserve memory, or build trust. but the enslaved transformed that strategy of division into the foundation of something new. Out of many African languages, European languages, and plantation realities came Creole languages. These languages were not broken English, broken French, broken Dutch, nor broken Spanish. They were acts of intelligence. They were linguistic revolutions. They allowed people who were never meant to understand one another to build community, share information, tell jokes, issue warnings, sing songs, pray, insult power. We can see that a couple months from now during our carnival. The tradition continues. Pass on wisdom and raise children. Creole language was not merely a tool of communication. It was a declaration. You may control the plantation records, but we control the living word. The same was true of religion and culture. African spiritual systems did not disappear. They adapted, they hid, they blended, they wore masks, literally and figuratively when they had to. They moved through drumming, which we saw earlier, dance, healing, mourning, naming, food, burial practices, festivals, proverbs, and everyday philosophy. Syncretism was not evidence that African culture had died. Syncretism was evidence that African culture knew how to survive. Take capoeira, an Afro-Brazilian dance whose origins are said to be an African martial art. Oppressed people often preserve dangerous knowledge by making it appear harmless. A rhythm may be more than a rhythm. A dance may be more than a dance. A festival may be more than a festival. A joke may be more than a joke. A drum may carry news. A song may carry strategy. A prayer may carry rebellion. This is one of the great lessons of enslaved life in the Americas. Domination produces surveillance, but oppressed people produce codes. The plantation owners saw labor. The enslaved saw sabotage. The plantation owners saw singing. The enslaved heard memory. The plantation owners saw provision grounds. The enslaved built food security. The plantation owners saw Sunday markets. The enslaved built networks of exchange. The plantation owners saw Obia, Mayal, Voodoo, Kumina, revival, and other spiritual forms as superstition or threat. The enslaved understood that spirit, healing, justice, and resistance could not be separated. Resistance took many forms. Some resistance was individual, running away, refusing to work, breaking tools, feigning illness, which some of my students still do, stealing time, preserving forbidden relationships, learning to read where prohibited, or refusing to internalize the enslaver's definition of one's humanity. But resistance was also collective. Enslaved people plotted together, fled together, formed maroon communities together, revolted together, worshipped together, and preserved memory together. Across the Caribbean, we see revolts, conspiracies, strikes, poisonings, arson, marronage, and military resistance. We see Taki's revolt in Jamaica in 1760. We see the Haitian Revolution beginning in 1791, the only successful slave revolution in the modern Atlantic world. We see Bussard's rebellion in Barbados in 1816. We see the Demerara rebellion of 1823. We see the Baptist War or Christmas rebellion in Jamaica of 1831 to 1832, which is associated with Sam Sharp, in which tens of thousands were mobilized, and this shook British confidence in the future of slavery. The UK National Archives highlights the Baptist War as a major example of resistance to slavery and recent scholarship has reinforced the argument that slave revolts helped push abolition from below. So it forced the British and others to end slavery before they projected that they would have to. We see the same spirit in smaller islands as well. In Montserrat, in 1768, St. Patrick's Day plot. This plot reminds us that enslaved Africans understood timing, surveillance, and the weaknesses of their oppressors. The plan was to strike while Irish enslavers were distracted by St. Patrick's Day celebrations. The plot was discovered and 9 people were executed. Today, Montserrat's St. Patrick's Day commemoration remembers not only Irish heritage, but also enslaved African resistance. The Montserrat example is especially important because it includes both courage and betrayal. The plot was betrayed, yes, but here again, we must be careful. Betrayal occurred among the enslaved, just as betrayal has occurred in every oppressed society. Fear can break people. Promises can tempt people. Proximity to power can confuse people. Survival can lead people into terrible choices. But betrayal is not the whole story. If we focus only on the betrayer, we miss the organizers. We miss the people who planned. We miss those who risked death. We miss the people who believed freedom was possible, even when the odds were against them. To tell the story properly, we must first refuse 2 lies. The first lie says Africans and their descendants were not united. Were always united, sorry. That is romantic and false. The second lie says Africans and their descendants were naturally divided. That is racist and false. The truth is more powerful. Unity was not automatic. Unity was built. It had to be imagined, negotiated, defended, repaired, and then rebuilt after betrayal. That is why our ancestors matter. They do not offer us a childish history of perfect heroes. They offer us an adult history of imperfect people struggling toward freedom in brutal circumstances. And this brings us to emancipation itself. For too long, emancipation has been narrated as a freedom descended from the conscience of Britain. The British Parliament passed legislation and slavery ended. That is the simplified version still taught in UK schools and sixth form colleges. But the truth is that slavery did not end because empire suddenly became kind. Slavery ended because enslaved people made slavery untenable. It ended because abolitionists organized. It ended because black writers, rebels, maroons, sailors, preachers, mothers, market women, laborers, and soldiers forced the question of slavery into the center of Atlantic politics. It ended because maintaining slavery became morally, politically, economically, and militarily costly. The British abolished the slave trade in 1807. They legislated the abolition of slavery in much of the British Caribbean in 1833, with the law taking effect in 1834. But even then, full freedom was delayed by apprenticeship, a system designed to extract continued labor from the formerly enslaved. Full freedom in most of the British Caribbean came only in 1838. We should also remember that compensation was paid not to the enslaved, but to the enslavers. The people had been robbed of labor, land, family, language, and life received no compensation. The people who claimed property in human beings were compensated for the loss of that so-called property. This fact alone should remind us that emancipation was incomplete at birth. Legal freedom did not mean land. Legal freedom did not mean justice. It did not mean education. It did not mean political power. It did not mean economic independence. And it did not mean psychological repair. The formerly enslaved had to continue the struggle after slavery. They had to fight for wages, land, churches, schools, family autonomy, political rights, and dignity. They had to build villages, mutual aid, friendly societies, independent churches, peasant economies, trade unions, political movements, and eventually national movements. emancipation was not the end of struggle. It was the opening of a new phase. That is why emancipation must never be reduced to costume, ceremony, to costume, ceremony, or holiday. Celebration is important, yes. Music is important. Food is important. Dress is important. Public ceremony is important. But if emancipation becomes only celebration, we betray its meaning. Emancipation must also be analysis, education, political memory, economic questioning, regional consciousness. It must be a demand for reparatory justice, and it must be a challenge to dependency. And that brings us to the present. This lecture is not only about the past, it is about the Caribbean today. It is about St. Kitts and Nevis today. It is about CARICOM, the OECS, and small island states trying to survive in a world where power still speaks loudly, where larger states still pressure smaller states, and where sovereignty is respected in speeches but tested in practice. Our ancestors understood external pressure. They understood what it meant to have decisions about their lives made elsewhere. They understood what it meant to have their labor extracted, their land controlled, their movement regulated, and their bodies treated as instruments of someone else's prosperity. Today, we are not enslaved. We are citizens of independent and self-governing states. But independence does not make us immune to pressure. Small states can still be pressured through aid, trade, visas, security, cooperation, debt, diplomatic threats, investment, sanctions, migration policy, and access to international systems. We see this in the wider region. We see renewed US militarism and interventionist language in relation to Latin America and the Caribbean. In 2026, US officials are promoting a revamped version of the Monroe Doctrine, framed around US primacy in Latin America, security cooperation, migration, and counter-narcotics operations. We have also seen the US capture and forced transfer of President Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela to the United States, described by major policy sources as a dramatic intervention in Venezuelan sovereignty. We see pressure around Cuba. The United States describes its measures as embargoes, sanctions, and restrictions. Most of the rest of the world sees it as a blockade because of the practical effects on trade, finance, fuel, medicine, and development. The US has also expanded visa restrictions connected to Cuba's overseas medical missions, arguing, without offering any evidence, that they involved forced labor. While Caribbean governments and communities have often experienced Cuban medical cooperation as essential support for fragile health systems. We see pressure around migration. The United States has pursued third country deportation arrangements, sending or seeking to send people to countries other than their own. Reports in 2026 indicated that Jamaica was in talks with the United States about accepting third country deportees, and broader reporting has identified this policy as part of an expanding immigration enforcement strategy involving multiple countries. Now, reasonable people may disagree on foreign policy. Reasonable people may disagree on US policy towards Venezuela or Cuba. Reasonable people may disagree on migration. But the deeper question for us is not whether every Caribbean state must have identical views on every issue. The deeper question is this: when external pressure comes, do we face it together or separately? If one small island is pressured alone, it is vulnerable. If one government is isolated, it can be squeezed. If one economy is threatened, it can be punished. If one minister is targeted, one visa revoked, one aid program questioned, one security arrangement dangled, one investment promised, one market threatened, then the temptation is to make a private deal and hope the storm passes. But private deals can become regional weakness. Silence can become precedent. Division can become policy. And once powerful states learn that we can be separated, they will separate us again and again. This is where the lesson of our ancestors becomes urgent. The enslaved were deliberately divided. They were divided by language, plantation, island, occupation, color, legal status, African-born versus Creole-born, skilled versus field laborer, domestic versus field worker, male and female, driver and gang, Christian and non-Christian, African ethnic origin, and proximity to a great house. Plantation society was a machine for manufacturing division, and yet enslaved people learned how to communicate across these divisions. They learned to build networks. They learned to disguise messages. They learned to gather at markets, funerals, religious meetings, provision grounds, dances, and festivals. They learned that survival required more than individual cleverness. It required collective intelligence. The Caribbean today needs collective intelligence. We need a regional policy culture that understands sovereignty as shared defense, not isolated pride. We need CARICOM and the OECS to act not only as meeting structures, but as instruments of regional protection. We need common positions on the treatment of Caribbean migrants. We need common principles on third-party deportation arrangements. We need common defense of the right of small states to receive medical assistance without intimidation. We need common insistence that the Caribbean Sea must not become a theater for great power rivalry. We need common food security strategies, common climate adaptation strategies, common educational strategies, common cultural memory, and common diplomatic courage. Unity does not mean that St. Kitts and Nevis must surrender its national interests. Unity means understanding that our national interest is weakened when the region is weak. Unity does not mean that every government must speak in the same tone. Unity means that beneath our different tones, there must be shared principles. Unity does not mean that we ignore human rights concerns in countries with which, Unity does not mean that we ignore human rights concerns in countries with which we have relations. But it means that human rights concerns must not be used as a convenient foreign policy tool by certain countries while ignoring the human rights abuses of their own allies. Unity does not mean anti-Americanism, anti-Europeanism, or hostility to any people. Our quarrel is not with peoples. Our concern is with power. Our concern is with the right of Caribbean societies to determine their own future. Our concern is with the old habit of empire returning in new language, with words such as security, order, migration control, market discipline, strategic partnership. The Caribbean must be mature enough to engage the world without bowing to it. This is where education becomes central. The Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College has a role to play. We are not only training people for jobs, we are training people to recognize patterns. As a historian, archaeologist, and heritage professional, let me say this. History teaches pattern recognition. Archaeology teaches that what lies buried still shapes the present. Heritage teaches that memory is infrastructure. Political education teaches that small states survive not by pretending the world is fair, but by understanding how power works. Our students must know that emancipation was not charity. They must know that Caribbean freedom was fought for. They must know that enslaved Africans were not passive victims waiting for European benevolence. They must know that African culture did not die in the Middle Passage. They must know that Creole language is not shameful. They must know that resistance was intellectual, spiritual, military, economic, and cultural. They must know that betrayal occurred, but that betrayal did not define us. They must know that unity is not a slogan. It is work, real work. And we, as adults, must model that work. We cannot tell young people to value regional unity while we treat neighboring islands as rivals to be mocked. Or, as in the case of Haiti, as an alien menace to be vilified. We cannot speak of Caribbean civilization while importing every cultural standard from elsewhere. We cannot celebrate emancipation while despising the speech, music, religion, dress, and creativity of ordinary Caribbean people. We cannot praise ancestors who resisted empire while teaching our children that every solution must come from outside. We cannot demand reparations from Europe while reproducing inequality, class contempt, gender violence, and political tribalism here at home. Emancipation asks something of us. It asks whether we have freed our imagination. It asks whether we have freed our institutions. It asks whether we have freed our economies. It asks whether we have freed our education systems from inherited contempt. It asks whether we have freed ourselves from the belief that smallness means helplessness. Our ancestors were not helpless. They were constrained, brutalized, watched, punished, and exploited, but they were not helpless. They made choices where choices seemed impossible. They created culture where culture was attacked. They created family where family was violated. They created language where speech was controlled. They created rebellion where obedience was demanded. They created a future that they themselves did not fully live to see. We are living in that future, and because we are living in it, we are responsible for extending it. So what does it mean practically to rise up together? First, it means telling the truth about history, not a sentimental truth, not a self-hating truth, a full truth, a truth that admits African participation in the slave trade, but refuses to weaponize that fact against African dignity. A truth that admits betrayal, but honors resistance. A truth that recognizes European responsibility without denying African complexity. A truth that understands slavery as a system, not merely as a series of individual sins. Second, it means defending Caribbean culture as knowledge, our languages, festivals, foods, spiritual forms, music, and oral traditions are not leftovers. They are archives. They carry the memory of survival. They carry philosophies of community, humor, warning, healing, and endurance. The classroom must not be the place where Caribbean children learn to despise the knowledge of their grandparents. Thirdly, it means building regional solidarity before crisis comes. If we wait until pressure arrives, it is already too late. CARICOM and the OECS must develop common frameworks for dealing with external pressure on migration, health cooperation, sanctions, security operations, and diplomatic coercion. The region must know in advance what lines it will not cross, not wait until those lines are crossed and then scramble to respond. Fourth, it means placing young people at the center of emancipation. Emancipation must not only be about an annual event for officials and elders. It must be curriculum, debate, theater, film, music, research, public history, community archaeology, digital archives, and youth leadership. The story must live where people live. Fifth, it means understanding that unity requires repair. We cannot rise together if our societies are internally fractured by class arrogance, political victimization, gender inequality, color prejudice, xenophobia, and contempt for the poor. Regional unity begins with social justice at home. Finally, it means courage. Our ancestors had courage not because they were unafraid, but because they acted despite fear. The Caribbean today needs that kind of courage. Diplomatic courage, intellectual courage, cultural courage, economic courage, and moral courage. We are not being asked to face the whip, the auction block, the slave ship, or the plantation society militia. We are being asked to face debt, dependency, diplomatic pressures, historical amnesia, imported contempt, and the temptation to survive separately. Compared to what our ancestors faced, surely we can face this. As I close, I return to the title of this lecture, Rise Up Together or Sink Separately. This is not merely a dramatic phrase. It is a historical law. The enslaved learned it in the quarters, in the cane fields, in the markets, in the mountains, in the maroon camps, the churches, the dances, the plots, the rebellions, and in the long walk from slavery to freedom. They learned that no one survives oppression alone. They learned that culture is a weapon. They learned that memory is a shield. They learned that language can build a people. They learned that resistance requires trust. They learned that betrayal hurts, but it must not end the struggle. They learned that freedom is not given. It is taken, defended, and expanded. Now that lesson passes to us. Will we remember emancipation as a holiday only or as a mandate? Will we teach our children to admire freedom or to practice it? Will we allow external powers to divide us island by island, issue by issue, leader by leader, visa by visa, loan by loan? Will we reduce our ancestors to costumes and slogans, or will we honor them by continuing their work? The ancestors have already given their answer. They answered in the hole of the ship. They answered in the cane field. They answered in the drum. They answered in the Creole word, in the provision ground, in the maroon village, in the rebellion. They answered in the refusal to become what slavery said they were. Their answer was survival, creation, resistance. Their answer was unity built in struggle. The question now is whether we will give an answer worthy of them. May we rise up together, because if we do not, we will surely sink separately. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gill. I'm sure that we'll be here all night. So I hope that you would have brought your snack and your blankets. But before we open the floor for those who would wish to put Dr. Gill to the test, let me just have a little disclaimer. Please note that the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant provides this forum to encourage rigorous academic inquiry, historical reflection, and open civic discourse. The views, analysis, and opinions expressed by the keynote speaker, contributors, or audience members are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the official stance, policies, or endorsement of the CFBC, its boards of governors, or its administration. We ask that all questions and comments remain respectful, concise, non-partisan, and directly focus on the historical principles presented tonight. I don't have to read it again, right? Good. So, Dr. Gill, let us begin. So,
Good evening.
Mr. Hobson, you have... just press it.
Good evening. I am here at your leisure and pleasure. I welcome your questions, comments. We are here to participate, so feel free.
Okay, before we begin, I would like to say that in relation to Dr. Gill's presentation, it covers the entire scope of what we would teach here in Units 1 and 2 of history as well as Caribbean studies. So, I know that we have with us some persons who are experts in history, like Mrs. Rogers. And so we will expect Ms. Rogers to ask a question or two, or to correct us when we make any minor omissions as we go along. Right, Mrs. Rogers? All right. Dr. Gill, I will not say anything. I will say, well done, colleague.
Thank you. Thank you,
All
colleagues.
All right, so we have a gentleman.
Before the first question, I'm going to put Ms. Brooks on the spot. When I started the lecture, she was my mentor, and she still is my mentor. So many thanks in public for your mentorship and advice.
So we have the gentleman behind.
I mean, a gentleman and a revolution thinker. But give thanks for the love.
All right.
Blessed night to everyone. Greetings and honor. Give thanks, Brother Gill, for your great research and studies that you have given to our people to really open up the, as they say, the horizon. But
Thank you, Masayo.
You're welcome. We like to ask generally because we really look at this from an educational standpoint. See, we have young youths in our midst, probably that is very informal to what you discuss here. And we know in our history, we have seen a lot of it being dilapidated by people who we say we're supposed to be safeguarding these things. Now, my question is, with your lecture that you present here tonight, what is the standard that you outline as your team rise together? But we'd like to know, are we really serious with the educational format to create that risen standard of our ancestors and who we are as an African people? Because I mean, neither no Kitishan, nor division, but we are African in ancestors within what we inheritance from our ancestors. Just give thanks for what you have done with your work, but we really need to see much of our generation really got the code of where we went through from that time to this time. Blessed love.
Hey, blessed. One love, Vasayo. Thank you for your question. Let me begin your answering with a comment on something you said. I will respectfully differ from you on one point. I strongly believe that you can be proud and embrace your African ancestry while at the same time being proud of your present nationality. Kitishan, Nivision, Antiguan, Jamaican, Cuban, whatever. So I am proud to call myself an Afro-Caribbean person, but at the same time as a Kitishan. So I embrace both. So you can be both. Now, to try and answer your question, I would say that people like Ms. Brooks, myself, and others, we are passionate about teaching history. The issue we face is at the policy level. And by coincidence, just last week, Trevor's had this conversation. In several Caribbean islands, including St. Kitts and Nevis, a decision was made a few years ago to make history a non-compulsory subject, okay? And that in the secondary schools. Yeah, and that has done a lot of damage, okay? Because, okay, on the surface, it sends a message, it's not important, okay? We've seen it at the college in that we are seeing a trend now. When you enroll at CFBC, like most other reputable higher education institutions, you need to do a humanities course, no matter what your major is, okay? And you see a lot of students coming in without certain subjects. You have students coming and say, I want to do law, but don't have history, okay? Now, there is no respected college or university that takes you into a law program without history and or English. So that is the problem. So those of us who are on the front lines, we are passionate. People like Lavon Brooks, Tony Frederick, myself, past teachers like Ms. Cable and Ms. Rogers, we are passionate. The issue at the policy level, getting those at the policy level to take our history seriously. Now, what I always hope for is that through teaching, if I influence one student who in the future becomes the Prime Minister, a Minister of Education, they remember something that Ms. Brooks or Dr. Gill or somebody said in class, and that motivates their policy when it comes to protecting our history and our heritage. So that's what we are trying to do. Okay? If we can't influence the present leader, but we keep trying, we hopefully could influence the future leaders in terms of policies towards protecting the teaching of our history and promotion of our heritage. So thanks again for that question.
All right. Before we move on to the next question, I see our colleague, Mr. Francil Morris. And I hope, Mr. Morris, you're taking note that we are begging, we are pleading.
We are.
The Chief Education Officer, we are asking, we are begging that history remains a compulsory subject in all.
Yes.
In all secondary schools.
Yes.
Right, Mr. Morris? Thank you. All right, the next person, I saw Mr. Daniel Han.
I have the mic.
Okay, who has the mic?
I do over here.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, and a blessed evening to everybody who's here in person and who's listening online. Mr. Dr. Gill, one quick question, and I know this is probably beyond your pay grade, but history can't just start in high school.
Agreed.
History has to start in primary school. In the homes, in fact. Because if we don't, who will? In my home, we do it. We can't wait for the education system to do it for us. We first have to know who we are so we can tell our children who they are. Not to go to school for somebody to put them in a category. So that is my comment. And I know that, you know, the gentleman you were calling out just now, Ms. Brooks, that's beyond his pay grade as well. Okay, so he has to answer to somebody who has to answer to somebody else. And ultimately, we are the ones who put those people in power. Okay, so you know where that goes.
Yeah.
So let's educate our children with our history, not their history. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, I Queen. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, I Queen. Let me respond quickly. First of all, I agree. It needs to start in the home. You don't expect the parent to be a subject matter expert, but encourage, okay, the encouragement to take it seriously. The second thing, right, some years ago, when I was still teaching at the Immaculate Conception Catholic School, we were invited, some teachers were invited to take part in a workshop. It was held at the conference room at Royal St. Kitts, for teachers from different schools. And the workshop was to propose review of the primary and secondary school curriculums. And several of us, myself included, the recommendation we made is that, okay, at secondary level, you're doing the CSEC syllabus, which focus, because the regional exam focuses on regional topics. So there's not too much room to maneuver. But what we suggested, at primary school, that's the perfect place to start teaching local history, okay? And I'm going to, of course, use the opportunity, because every time I get a mic, I do it. A lot of our primary school children have never heard of Marcus of the Woods or Better Douglas, okay? Ask them who Robin Hood or Batman is, or Thanos. They could tell you, okay? Now, as much as I love Marvel comics like any other big kid, they are figments of somebody's imagination, okay? Marcus is real. Beto was real. The martyrs of the Buckles Revolt, they were real people, okay? So we need to start teaching our local history in the primary schools. That's where it needs to start, from early on. That's how you foster national pride, sense of awareness, so that no matter what that child becomes, whether they could become a building contractor, a plumber, a lecturer, or a doctor, they have a sense of awareness and a sense of pride in themselves. So thanks for that, I Queen.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Daniel.
I just want to ask you a question in relation to two things that happened in St. Kitts. You, in your discussion, you pointed to the strengths and resilience of the ancestors, so that Slavery was abolished in the Caribbean on the 1st of August, 1834. Yeah, English-speaking Caribbean. And by August 6 in St. Kitts, there was a rebellion, a strike, riot, people revolting 6 days after. So it must mean that there was some level of organization and communication before, 6 days after. 100 years after, at the Buckley's riots, they started strike again. Is it your sense that this tempo for resistance and pushing for improvement has somehow been dampened in the community? And is it that we haven't been heavily focused on these major events because they were absolutely critical to the development of the society? And the second question is, how do we move when the sister here mentioned in the society, in the family, we have to train them? But how do you move in the family when you are told partnership is a leaky ship?
Repeat what you just said, partnership.
I'm saying, how do we move and build history and collaborate and so on when very often in our societies, in the families, we are told a partnership is a leaky ship. And that helps to explain why you don't have a lot of companies together, a lot of sole traders, because we are told partnership is a leaky ship. And the economic, I think also there is some need to focus on economic power. Economic power is critical, very, very critical for us to transform the society and develop that level of independence that you speak to. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Regard to the first question, right? What I love about it that I ask myself the same question all of the time. Why is it that you don't see that same spirit of resistance now? No, I don't. All I can do in response to it is to think aloud. Is it because our generation has become so materially comfortable? Yeah. Yeah, so people have become so comfortable. We live in nice houses, we drive nice cars, we have nice jobs, and people are just concerned about, their material comfort. And so I don't know if that's the problem, why we, because you look at Buckley's, etc. And we were some of the most, when it comes to resisting, we were often the leaders, okay? One of the reasons why Fidel, myself, Sarah, and others are trying to get Marcus the Woods inscribed. He was the only Maroon leader who actually increased his activities after emancipation, because him and other Kittitians realized that, listen, this is a piece of paper, but they're still using us. Mm-hmm. And then more recently at the Buckley's Revolt, which was one of many throughout the entire Caribbean where people felt, well, listen, conditions have not improved for generations now. We can't take this anymore. So I don't know if we become, but let me say something, right? There's a psychic. Miss, you're psychic. I was just going to say it. Yeah. Partisanship has become a major problem. And I think I hinted at it in my lecture. Okay? Partisanship has become a major issue. Okay? And you just mentioned the teachers' union. Because I used to be a secondary school teacher, and that is why I left the union, because, yeah. So that is a big problem. Comfort and partisanship. That is a big problem. To come to the second thing, I think too many of us have, look here, you will find opportunists and betrayal anywhere you go. But I think many of us have fed into the stereotype that we can't come together, and we tend to believe that. Okay? So because we have internalized it so much. So that is why it's hard for people to come. But if you look around, you see examples of cooperation at work. TDC and Horsfords created Sinkis Masonry Products, which is one of the most, and the breweries, two of the most successful commercial entities in the Eastern Caribbean, not the Sinkis, in the Eastern Caribbean. Okay? So it is possible to come together. This college, we're not perfect, no institution is, but this college, despite our serious lack of resources, we work miracles every year to produce students who can get into the best universities in the world. And we do that because deans, lecturers, we work together. People have their differences, yes, it's human beings. But at the end of the day, most of us, maybe not all of us, but most of us, we put aside petty differences for the greater good of the institution. So it is possible. And not because I work here. I'm going to tell you the honest truth, CFBC is an example of that. Okay? CFBC, breweries, sinks masonry products, etc. So we can't come together, but we have internalized this myth that coming together of black people means automatic betrayal. Okay? So that's a myth we have internalized, so that's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Next, somebody at the back. A gentleman at the back.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome.
Good night to the audience. First, I must say to the audience, it's simply this. I know Dr. Gill for a little while now, because sometime last year, Dr. Gill approached me several times, asked me certain questions. So I asked him, why should you be asking me these questions? He said to me that because I see that you're an elder and you should know certain things. So I told him, okay, I'm a very busy man, but I will find some time to talk with you. He would meet me again, and I would be saying the same thing to him. Then one day he cornered me and said, come. I wanted to write these things in chronological order. I told him so, but is a big but, was a big but. So I invited him to sit with me in the front on my porch, and I started to give him information straight off my head like that. It was about, say, roughly 3/4 of an hour to an hour we stayed. And he said to me, listen, Mr. Salters, like every question I had to ask you, you had already answered them. I said, thank you, Dr. Gill. Let me say, secondly, Dr. Guilford and I worked together as policemen. Good. And that again brought our friendship to much more close. And when I heard about the lecture, but I did not know who was the person in charge, I said, no, this is a subject matter that I definitely would like to hear. And I am here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic is rise up together or sink separately. We rose up in 1932. We went through in 1935, and we technically confirmed it in 1940, and went through to 1948. By 1952, correct me please, we had adult suffrage. We were together all those times. Went down through the 60s. And then I saw a gleam of division, but we held on, still together. And between 1971 and 1980, we were separated. And we went back, we find ourselves back in the hands of plantocracy. Plantocracy. I do not wish to have the whole night here tonight with this matter, but it's a very serious matter. We're supposed to have leadership, because, before I go into that, let me say here, in St. Kitts, it is plantocracy versus the working class people. And all through the years of my growing up, I must say that I am 80 now, just 3 months more, then I will be 80 years old, 80. People can't believe that. And I looked at it, and I said to myself, no, something is not right, because after the death of Robert Bratcher, I couldn't understand what was going on. Because he told us about we are together, we are the working class people, and we should stay so. And in my mind throughout, I had it so, and I still have it so. But unfortunately, when we think that we are together, the enemy, plantocracy, I must say this clear, who want vex. The enemy of plantocracy got into the system, whether by money or whatever. And that is why I want to say here and now that we are not sinking, but should I say that we already sunk? I can't, I don't know. But what I expect today, and I would say to you all, that people, my people meet me day after day, call me, asking me questions. Why? They say, well, Mr. Salters, you're some kind of, you're an elder and you should know. And I have to find answer to give them in order to console them. I am asking the question now, where are we today, socially and economically? Because a couple of us rose up and the plantocracy force came up against us. Some take green card, some take yellow card, and all kind of card. But I want to say I don't even have a passport today. Right. So, I must say this, that based on all those factors, I cannot go anywhere now. I am too old for that. So my job today is to teach the younger ones. Economic-wise, political-wise, I do not think we the people got the message. We have gone away. All they have for us today, music, rum, eat. We're not getting anywhere. And I'm feeling very much put out and ashamed for my people. And those who are supposed to lead us, as the late King Starshield say, woe be unto that shepherd who lead the sheep astray. I'm very sorry. Somebody might go back and say, man, Salters gave you some blows last night. But I'm very sorry for that. No member of the plantocracy element, no element of plantocracy should be involved in a working class people's government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Salter. Let me just quickly say, Mr. Salter participated in an oral history project I'm undertaking right now, which hopefully would be resulting in my next book. But so stay tuned for more details sometime in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Gill.
That is true. And the plantocracy takes many forms. It could from local elites to the global north. But we can only combat it if we work together and not be divided. It doesn't mean we agree all the time, but you put aside what are relatively petty differences for a greater cause. That's what we need to learn to do. In other words, and put it bluntly, as I always tell people, we need to know what battles to fight. We need to stop fighting the petty battles and focus on. We have strength to sometimes to gossip and pull on one another. Okay? If somebody give Miss Kelly a lift, somebody call her husband before she reach home. We have time for that. But we don't have time to really focus on the important things. We need to pick the important battles. That is what we need to do.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to stand to say that it is a privilege to be here tonight to hear your presentation.
Thank you.
And it is obvious that you spent quite a bit of time to prepare for this lecture. and that for those who might have doubt that this is of international quality. And I think we should give Dr. Gill a round of applause for it. I wanted to make 2 points. One, I think, in relation to what my dear friend Mr. Salt said. We were both late, so I don't know if we got the full magnitude of the lecture. But based on what he said, I think his understanding goes beyond the lecture. The women, I might be stoned in Bastia tomorrow, but historically the women led. And today, when you walk Bastia and you see certain things, you get very, very concerned. And you ask, where are the leaders to guide these young ladies? What crucible they came through to come out like that? So that's one. CIA? Okay. The other point which I wanted to make was that the issue of the 2 incidents and why is it there has not been a continuation. I posit, maybe wrongly, that in those days there was no escape. But then we had the movement to Santo Domingo, to Cuba, the United States. So the lid of the pot was able to lift. And the pressure was able to be reduced. And so there is not that same degree of need for agitation because the space that we are fighting in is not as crowded. So that's one. Maybe that explains it, maybe not, but might contribute towards it. The last point I want to make is that, yes, we have been told that part is leadership, but I look at the credit union system in St. Kitts and Nevis. And for those of you who don't know, the Nevis Cooperative Credit Union is the biggest financial institution in Nevis. You have First Federal Cooperative, you have the police, and you have St. Kitts Cooperative. Financial cooperatives where ordinary people have pooled their resources together, contrary to what we have been told that partnership is leadership, and are approaching the most dominant economic sector of our communities. So we have that to look at. The non-financial cooperatives need support, but the financial cooperatives are an example of what we can achieve when we work together. You can also put alongside that national, our own, which we have created from scratch, from nothing, to be in one of the biggest financial institutions in the Caribbean region. And I think we deserve a round of applause because that is our own. So I just want to raise those 2 points, or 3, and to thank the CFBC for its vision in bringing this together. And sometimes some of us would say that there are certain institutions, when you look at the present reality, must be beyond partisan politics. And I think CFBC is one.
Agreed.
Where people from all persuasions come together to create and shape the minds of the future generations.
Exactly.
And long may that be so. Thank you very much and pleasant night.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jenkins. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins.
What I would add is the Bank of Nevis, which is an indigenous institution, and it is now growing, that it has 2 main areas, and it is one of, it almost is the second largest indigenous financial institution.
After National Bank.
After National Bank. Yeah. Okay. Who's next? All right.
Good evening, Ambassador.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It's a real pleasure to be among such a distinguished crowd this evening. For those of you who may not know me, I am Ambassador Nerisse Dockery, who was the former ambassador of St. Kitts and Nevis to the United Nations. And in my present incarnation, I am the Secretary General of the UNESCO National Commission. And I just really had to stand today, even though I am trying to abbreviate a lot of what I can say, because there were so many different strands to what has been discussed. Challenges around governments and the regional approaches where foreign policy is concerned. We've had challenges in terms of our education system and the teaching of history. And I'm just going to make a few points to maybe about 3 of those strands. The first, though, I must say congratulations to Dr. Gale on such a profound speech.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Speaking on a topic that is so relevant today. We are all, I'm quite sure, aware of the movement that's happening. It's almost as if it's an idea whose time has come. And the spirit of Marcus Garvey and Nkrumah and Senghor and George Padamore and Aimé Césaire and Franz Fanon, it's returned. And it has infused us with a kind of courage for the times that we're in, especially when it comes to advancing the ultimate cause to end the whole saga around emancipation, which is the quest for reparatory justice. And based on what you have said, Dr. Gale, I'm hoping that we would be able to draw strength from our history, because for me, I have always said that the history of slavery is not one of defeat. It is one of triumph, because at every level, our ancestors raised their heads and walked in dignity to fight and champion for their rights. And every century that passed, every decade that passed, there was always a remnant who carried the torch, kept the embers burning for the other generation to follow. But before I go on, I want to congratulate Dr. Gale, because this lecture is actually being watched by the UNESCO Regional Office in Jamaica. I have invited all of the Secretaries General across the region, because our government, we have, based on my nomination, we have recommended Dr. Gale as the leading and most prolific, one of the most prolific scholars and professors of history, to be inducted into the UNESCO International Scientific Roots of Enslaved Peoples Committee in Paris. So, Mr. Jenkins, you spoke of his lecture this evening being of an international quality and standard, and I'm sure that they will all agree. And our region has been mobilized to support his candidature, particularly given that we only had one representative in the past who is a Jamaican professor, and she no longer will be serving. And so we definitely need that Caribbean voice on that committee. And by all indications from our permanent representative, Ambassador David Doyle, there is a lot of support for that, and it's very likely that he will be approved to sit on that distinguished and important panel. So let's give a round of applause for him. But quickly, let me just speak to the fact that I have never been someone who was extroverted and enjoyed public speaking. I have always been someone who was introvert. For those of you in the room who are my teachers and principals and all of that, Miss Cable, I see you, Miss Rogers, I see you. You would know that I have always been a very shy person, but I have had to find my voice in these times. And I have had to teach myself to be more expressive, because there's a serious need for leadership where these things are concerned. And I first got my taste through serving on the back then it was the Slave Root Committee under Mr. Antonio Maynard. I had the privilege of serving as the chair of the first lecture series committee where we brought in, I'm sure you would recall, the distinguished, dearly departed Rex Nuttaford. We brought Vereen Shepherd. I don't know if you recall the lecture series that we held around the 200th bicentennial anniversary of the abolition of the slave trade back in 2007. We brought in Rex Nuttaford, we brought in Ashwa Kwesi, and we brought in Vereen Shepherd. And then later on, I also, working along with Mr. Maynard, even as a senior foreign service officer, in 2015, we hosted that two-day regional conference on reparations, beyond reparations, and strengthening slave root committees from around the region, where we brought 14 countries here with Sir Hilary Beckles being the featured speaker. And then we had a whole full conference where we all shared ideas about how we can collaborate and work better across the Caribbean region. And we compiled those ideas into what was called the Bastia Declaration, which still exists. And the next step was to have been to bring that Bastia Declaration to the attention of Parliament so that they can agree that this is the next move. And part of that was the importance of the teaching of history in our schools. So just to touch on that point real quick, I just want to say that the Ministry of Education has made a commitment over 2 years ago that they will begin the work to develop a national curriculum on what they're calling the St. Kitts Nevis studies, where for the first time ever we were going to compile and list a consultant, the lead consultant, one of them being Mr. Leonard Stapleton, as one of our organic intellectuals in that regard, but also supervised by a national task force of history and heritage practitioners across St. Kitts and Nevis. And that work has been done, but because of staffing constraints within the curriculum development unit, which is a very small unit, and all of the many other courses that were being launched at the time, such as the life skills course and the Education for Sustainable Development course, it was a little bit overwhelmed, but it's certainly one of the things that even the permanent secretary and the minister has asked that I work along with the heads there to ensure that this takes place. And I'm also in the process of trying to secure UNESCO funds to assist in this regard in terms of the payment of that consultant, as well as bringing in a UE professor in the person of Mr. Aaron Kamugisha to sort of supervise that whole process. So this is something that your voices have been heard, the policy decision has been taken. It's just that given our constraints as a small island state and small staff and lack of human resources, it has just been slow in coming, but we are being very intentional, and I for certain am being very intentional. But I also want to say that as a citizen first, even beyond any title, whether as Foreign Service Officer, whether it's as the former ambassador of the UN, or even when I was at the UN, we all must play our role. We all must play our role. And in my role, I have tried my best to bring experiences where our people can be exposed to some of these personalities by the way of lectures. And you would have seen even last year where we brought in Dr. Julius Garvey, and we had such an amazing experience with the 2 remembrance ceremonies that we held. And part of the challenge is that as a people, we tend to look to government for everything, to lead off on everything, to fund everything. And unfortunately, where private sector support is concerned, it's very difficult. Very, very difficult to get the levels of funding that you need to do something meaningful. Because Dr. Garvey's visit alone was over $70,000 just to pull off between flights and all of that, right? And if it weren't for the Office of the Prime Minister, who gave tangible and serious financial assistance with that, and Mr. Arthur Sharp, we wouldn't have been able to pull it off. So that's also part of the challenge. And so I would just implore all of us, one of the things that came out, and I'm sorry, I don't want this to turn into another lecture, but one of the things that came out of Dr. Garvey's visit, particularly when he spoke at the grounds of the Mutual Improvement Society, was a call when we were on air, on radio with Tony and Dr. Gill himself. There was a call from the country that we need an institution similar to the Mutual Improvement Society in these times as well. And there's certainly an opportunity for anyone to come together, for us to come together and form some sort of NGO that is very explicit about bringing these kinds of experiences, opportunities to debate with each other, opportunities to bring speakers in, and for us to collaborate in this regard. The Roots of Enslaved Peoples Committee, we are still committed. We are going to be institutionalizing something that's called the Umoja Pan-African Dialogues, where we are reformatting our lecture series to be more interactive. So that's happening. On the last point, in terms of foreign policy, I just want to say one thing. It is very easy, and Dr. Gill, you did speak about how Caribbean states, we need to come together, we need to move as one. It is not just about, giving lip service to notions of togetherness, but sometimes we have to stand 10 toes down together. And it's very easy from the outside looking in. What is happening in this world with all of the insanity and the moral decay that is taking over the foreign policy space, what small nations like ours have found safety in is a type of principled nationalism where we are not necessarily waiting for consensus, because every state is now really and almost justifiably working in their national interest first and foremost. So you're going to see a Jamaica do its own thing. You're going to see a Guyana do its own thing. But when I was at the UN, I spoke about the power of one. Sometimes it takes one to step forward. So what I'm seeing happening in terms of a foreign policy stance is that you would see a type of concentric circle kind of situation where when you can't get consensus, and I can tell you, I can speak all night about what it's like to negotiate within a CARICOM caucus with all these competing interests and trying to come to a common position. Yes, so just to wrap up, I just want to say that one can step out, and sometimes you might find two who are like-minded. And once you step out, sometimes just that act and you being able to present a reasoned, principled argument, right, and almost call the bluff of those who are thinking that we would remain silent, sometimes just that one act can create all of the difference. And I can give you many examples where, as the ambassador, I was the one to step out, or they be the one most forceful. And situations that had been in place at the UN for 20 years were shifted immediately because we decided as one country to step out. So I just want to leave us on that note, because as I said, there are many strands to what we discussed, and I just wanted to just provide us and leave us with that.
Over here, and then over there. Miss Byron? Yeah, Byron. In the bar. All right, in the interest of time, we would ask persons to be brief. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Good night. So, history tells us why the West Indies Federation failed. But has the Caribbean actually learned from that failure? Or have we simply changed the institutions while repeating the same old patterns? In light of today's theme, what does history suggest about our future if we fail to overcome those same divisions?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that good question. I would say that, yes, some patterns have been repeated, but I would not say that we have not learned some of the lessons. I always tell, and you in one of my past Caribbean studies class, with the region integration, I always make the point that the OECS rose out of the ashes of the failure of the West Indies Federation, okay? Because these were the smallest, economically most vulnerable countries in the Caribbean, leeward and windwards. Between us, we have no bauxite, gold, oil, natural gas, like some of the other larger territories, but we saw the need for unity. And you remember what I said in the lecture? We did not let, the OSCs did not let past fail to deter it from trying. And we've been successful. Here's something that I think some of you might know, but I don't think most of you are aware of this. And I know this because I actually read this myself. I was in my 20s back then. Maybe that's how long that was. And I actually read this for myself in an Economist article. This was back in the late 1980s when the European Union was considering replacing individual currencies with the euro. So replacing the Spanish peso, the French franc, Italian lira, German Deutschmark, etc. They actually looked at the EC dollar. And people don't know this. The European Union used the EC dollar as a template to engineer the euro, okay? Because when we created the EC dollar, this is the first, because before that, the only time in history you would have several entities with one currency, it would be within an empire. Like several French territories using the franc, several British territories using the pound, etc. The EC dollar was the first time you had independent sovereign territories with widely different economies. Dominica focused on agriculture, Antigua on tourism, us with sugar tourism and then going into with sugar and going into tourism. Widely different economies. And to create a currency and a stable currency, we take it for granted. The EC dollar is the only major currency in the region that has so far, knock on wood, has never ever been devalued, okay? And in terms of its strength, in terms of the value, if I'm not mistaken, I think after the Barbados and the Bahama dollar, it is the third highest ranked currency in the region. This was created by tiny states that are dots on the map. And major powers, France, Germany, Belgium, Spain, Italy, looked at that and created the euro out of that. Okay, so yeah, we do learn some lessons, and we have created, I would say, some virtual miracles. And Caribbean history is a history of making the impossible happen. So yeah, there are lessons that need to be learned still, which I said in my lecture, but there are also examples to show that, listen, we can do this. If we come together, and I always, every year in Caribbean Studies, and when we do in Module 3 Independence, I always make the point to my students, look at what we in the Caribbean have achieved. The EC dollar. West Indies cricket, which a lot of people don't know, predates the Federation, even UWI. That is the oldest regional entity West Indies cricket. And while they may not be as dominant as they once were, that is another miracle. That is the only major cricket team that is made up of not just one country, but several individual independent entities to create a world-class team to take on England, Australia, India, etc. And even though we're not so dominant anymore, West Indies has become a trademark now that I always tell students, it's like what Ferrari is to Formula One motor racing. That even when they're not winning, they're the team everybody watching because they've become a brand, an iconic brand name now. So when you look at our history, there's nothing that is impossible when we come together. So we have our cricket team, the OECs, etc. Those show that we have learned some examples of the past, okay? But we need to remember those examples and be inspired by them.
We could also add the University of the West Indies.
Oh, yes.
Those of us who are Pelicans. Yes, yes. Right? We have recognized the importance of maintaining that institution. Yes, we have our growing pains, we have teething problems, but the university is among the top 5%. Am I right?
I think it's top 3%.
3%.
Top 3. Yeah.
And
quick point to add to that, UWI, how could I forget? Another miracle. UWI is going to turn 100 years old, I think in 2048, something on there? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not 100 years old yet. in the top 3, when you look at the Times League table list, the others in that list, Leiden, my other alma mater, founded in 1545. Oxford, Cambridge, founded in the 13th century. Harvard. So the other universities that you rubbing shoulder with were founded before St. Kitts was even colonized. Okay? Caribbean people did that. We did that. Okay?
And then Professor Byron after. Yes.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Gill, for a very informative lecture. I don't think many people can challenge what you've said. As a matter of fact, I would suggest that quite a number of people, including those that can drive change now, would agree with the points that you made. And you established that emancipation was actually not a one-off event, but a journey, so to speak. And the question I'd like to ask you, are you satisfied with the pace of change that is necessary for us to, as you put it, rise together or separately? Are you really satisfied with that? Because you mentioned institutions like UWI, for instance, and quite a number of our leaders have gone to UWI, and yet it seems so difficult to even mundane things, for instance, and since the UNESCO rep is here, why is it so difficult to get something as simple as a monument to slavery or something commemorating the Buckley's riot? Why is it so difficult, right? And so what is it? I mean, you mentioned courage, for instance. We seem to lack the kind of courage that our ancestors have. So I guess I'm looking for more prescriptions on should we really be impatient, exercise more patience or impatience? What should we do to get the kind of change that we need?
More impatience. But let me say this. Thanks for your comments. First, I'll answer your question. If I was satisfied with the pace of change, this would not have been a topic of my lecture. So, exactly. If I was satisfied, I would have chosen another topic. So I'm not satisfied. Why is it that despite that our leaders, men who come from UWI, are not as conscious of what needs to be done? I will put it this way. And if I offend, well, no apologies. There's a difference, and my mom used to say this too, my mom used to also say this. There's a difference between being educated and being enlightened, okay? We have no shortage of educated people in the Caribbean, including Sigis and Nevis. But a lot of our leaders, political and otherwise, are not enlightened, okay? So you may have your degree in medicine, law, etc. There are a lot of classmates I had at UWI who were doing history just to get into law school. They didn't care about history. Some of them were, I'll tell you, I'm not naturally bright, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, okay? I work hard to get what, if I have a passion for something, I put myself in a head first into it. I had classmates at UWI who are naturally bright. Just come to class, soak up the information, get all A's and off to law school. They couldn't care less about history class. It was just a stepping stone to get into law school, okay? To make the big bucks and buy a Mercedes. So, we have a lot of educated leaders in the region and nationally, political and otherwise. What we are lacking is enough enlightened leaders. And you know who I will give as a good example of a real specimen? My favorite prime minister in the region, Mayor Motley. My favorite prime minister in the region. The ambassador spoke about people. Now, yes, she's an example of somebody who speaks truth to power. The trouble is, she often does not get enough other leaders backing up when she takes a stance on an issue. Okay? And I will use her as an example to say something. I don't know if I'll have noticed that of all the territories being pressured when it comes to third-party deportees. You notice that you're not heard Barbados being pressured? How is it that we, Antigua, Jamaica, etc., being pressured to take deportees from all kind of places? You're not hearing about Barbados being pressured. Here's my theory. The saying, old African proverb, monkey know a limb to jump on. Okay. And for the non-West Indians listening online, in other words, bullies know who to pick on. Okay? So, if we roll over and play dead, I understand, I agree with your point, but the thing is, right, we need to be careful. I am very nationalistic, but we need to realize, we need to be strategic with our nationalism, okay? At the Davos meeting earlier this year, Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, made a statement which riled his counterpart in the White House, but because it was very true. And what Mark Carney said was that the middle powers cannot expect to individually take on a global hegemon. They need to come together, okay? So here's my argument. If that argument about unity applies to middle powers like Canada, Japan, Australia, Great Britain, France, Germany, then would it not apply even more to us, the small powers? So yes, we should not neglect arbitrary nationalism, but we need to be strategic with that nationalism, okay, and come together more. It cannot just be me and Motley alone making noise and everybody just shrink to a corner and hoping that the giant will ignore them. That cannot work. And I think we should realize that it is not working. It is not working. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Dr. Gill, first of all, I'd like to compliment you on an excellent lecture.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it very much.
Coming from your professor, that is indeed a compliment. Thank you.
No, I learned a lot, and I enjoyed it very much. And I wanted to say that I think you have underscored the importance of history as a subject, as an essential subject in school, both at the primary level and at the secondary level. I taught international relations for 29 years at UWI. And of course, history is an essential element for a discipline like that. And also, my own experience with history was that when I was doing history here as a student, we were doing European history. And it is when I went to UWI, and did Caribbean history, I mean, it just opened a whole different dimension of history to me. That's when I really learned about the trade union movement. That's when I learned properly about the importance of St. Kitts and Buckley's site in the trade union movement. And I began to understand my region in a different way. And I hope that we will never diminish the teaching of history in our schools, either at the primary or at the secondary level. It's very important, especially when you become an adult and whatever field you're working in, you understand the importance of knowing our history and the various implications of the past for the present and for the future. So that was really the point I wanted to make, how important a subject history is, particularly today, in guiding us and helping us to understand who we are and what we can do and how we can build our society.
Thank you, Professor. Quick comment, as we go to the other person, we need to realize that history is as vital as English and mathematics. Yes.
Good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Gill. You have no idea how difficult it was for me to get here this evening, but I reached.
Thank you, I really appreciate that,
yes.
Ms. Wallace.
I want to go back to what the gentleman there spoke about, and that is the difficulty of having monuments. We have come a long way. We have journeyed many years. And I'm reminded of a song that I learned a long time ago about shouting back our voice down the long road as far as our voice can carry to tell the others coming behind us that carry on. We, as the ones standing in the gap now. We cannot wait for someone else to build a monument to our forefathers who have sacrificed so much for us. So the next time when you have this kind of lecture, let us pay something. Let us, as Kititians and Nevisians, put our money where our mouth is. It don't have to be a lot, and it doesn't have to happen overnight. But it has taken us more than 100 years, more than 200 years, to build even one monument to our forefathers, even to take care of what, even though our forefathers were enslaved, they built all of these wonderful structures that we watch fall down around us. So we need to leave something for our younger persons coming on. We say they emulate the walk-up mentality, but we ain't giving them anything other to emulate. And so we have to go, and we can't wait for anybody outside to do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves. So if anything else come out of this lecture, is that we are responsible. We are very responsible for our next generation and our generations to come. Thank you.
We are indeed, indeed.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I commend the college on this inaugural lecture and the quality and passion with which it was delivered. I think bodes well for the future of the institution of the Emancipation Lecture. And my question, two questions. Would this lecture, would it be available in printed form?
I had not thought of that. I could consider it. Yeah.
Please do.
Okay.
And the second one is to the college itself. Dr. Gill, in his presentation, highlighted our failure to document our history, and also the fact that partisanship very much enters into it. And there's an aspect of our St. Kitts Nevis history that it is now, 33 and 26, 63 years, that there was an attempted coup on St. Kitts. Is it ever mentioned in any of our classrooms?
No, it's not.
Dr. Gill spoke about the fact that the stories of Beto Douglas and Marcus of the Woods are known by very few of our young people. And the idea that an important part of our political history, immediately in the first throes of throwing off colonialism through statehood in 1967, that a very important event took place that year on the 10th of June, and yet it is ignored because of partisanship. I trust that somewhere down the road, the college will be able to find someone willing to address this subject. The college will be able to find the opportunity to have research done so that in future years, those who come behind would know this important aspect of the history of St. Kitts Nevis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Yeah. I agree with Mr. Warner, right? And I want to use, because I always tell students, a lot of times you see patterns repeated that give us a warning. That event is not spoken about because that, again, partisanship. And we have a recent, what happened on the 6th of January in USA in 2021. You see a similar thing happening. Now, to my knowledge, I am Ms. Brooks, myself, Ms. Kelly. To my knowledge, we are all in our right minds, to the best of my knowledge. We know what we saw on television on the 6th of June 2021. But people are telling us that we did not see what we saw. Now, I know, I turn on, because somebody tell me, and when I turn on, I see people storming the Capitol building. I know that one law enforcement officer died after being beaten in the head with a fire extinguisher. Others were physically injured. Some of them are suffering PTSD. But there are people trying to pretend now that no attempted coup ever happened. Okay? So while a lot of us might ridicule what's happening in the USA, to make the point that Mr. Warner made, but Wikiticians are doing the same thing with 10th of June, was it? 1967. Okay? So I always like to use these examples to show people how. So yes, I agree. I completely agree. There's no disagreement there. We may disagree on other things, but on that, I completely agree with you. Completely agree with you.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Everyone.
Good evening, Jared. Mr. Jared Sage, my former student.
Indeed. So currently I'm studying at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus specifically. I'm majoring in Spanish. However, what I'd like to say is, if it wasn't for my love of languages, I would study history. And you are very much a big part of that. I remember every single history teacher / lecturer I've had. First form, I had Miss Warner. Second form, I think he's here. Mr. Tatum taught me history. And Dr. Gill, not only did you teach me history, but you were also our homeroom. And I think you definitely will never forget our class. I then transferred in 3rd form to 10th form to the Bastia High School, where I graduated, where I was taught by the lovely Mrs. Armstrong, or Tony Frederick, as some might know her. And then when I came to the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College, I was then again taught by Dr. Gill. I will say this. Even before I had reached the CFBC, I knew many things about history, but I felt like I hadn't truly understood until I came to you. There were several times where I would stay after class for 5 to 10 minutes, even 20, just talking to you, and never once did it feel like you were trying to shoo me away or just listening to me to, just pacify me. It felt like you truly listened, and you gave feedback. Not only did we talk about regional issues, but international issues. I discussed with you. And even though at the time I was 16, 17, I was still very young, you treated me like an adult, treated me like someone who truly mattered in society. And even though I know sometimes teachers might feel like their lessons fall upon deaf ears, mine were always listening to you. And just to let you know, teachers always shape the future, and you've definitely shaped mine. And I will never forget your lessons.
Thank you, Jared. Yeah, I remember we used to have History Unit 1 in the on this close to here, the foreign language room, the room upstairs next to the gazebo. Yeah, many times after class we'd sit down there and talk until your language lecturer, Mr. Manners, came. Yeah, I remember those days.
And let me add, Mr. Sage, you can do a double major in Spanish and history. Right. Anyone else?
I had the privilege of being in high school with Dr. Byron here. And if it's one thing that I experienced in history at the high school level, it was boring. Utterly boring. We had teachers whom I remember going to class out of respect so that she would feel that people turned up, but not that the classes were interesting. And when I got to college, I had a history teacher who spoke with the same passion that Dr. Gill speaks. And I said to this Fitzroy Bryan College, as well as to other institutions, engage history teachers who speak with passion. We don't want history teachers talking as if they're teaching calculus. We want history teachers speaking as if they are telling stories, because it is that way you get people interested in history. I could recite for you, in chronological order, the monarchs of England, starting with William the Conqueror in 1066. I couldn't tell you much about the Caribbean's history. And so we need teachers of history at all levels with the passion of Dr. Gill. And please, to everyone who's listening, where's the gentleman from the Ministry of Education? Please engage history teachers who will cause people to love history. It is such an important part of our lives.
Thank you again, Mr. Warner.
All right, so I know we said 2, but what I'd like anybody who hasn't spoke yet or who was waiting, if you could just put up your hand quickly so I can see what we're looking at. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then
We have
we're keeping you to 3 minutes, okay?
Good night. Excellent presentation, Dr. Gill.
Thank you.
I just rise because as 1967 was brought up, I lived through that experience because my dad at the time was the chief of police. And he was out of the house for maybe about 6 months. Many a night we slept under the beds because the bullets, we lived near to the cemetery. So the distance with the bullets flying from the, the defense force. All right, my mom went like a stick. So as you spoke about 1967, yes, we need to speak about it. Okay, it was very traumatic. My father was out the house, as I said, for about 6 months. So we had to bring in he had to bring in a police officer to be with us, right? So I can give that part of history, having lived through it.
Who's next?
Okay, I had one over here somewhere.
It was a real event, not a figment of people's imagination.
Certainly, there are several books written on it. I just want to say that I truly enjoyed your lecture.
Thank you.
And very informative, and I hope it provokes us to action. I just wondered about African history and whether it shouldn't be replacing European history in our curriculum because it has more importance for us than European history.
I'm going to respond to that. I'm to put in a plug for my colleague, and you correct me if I say anything wrong. Ms. Brooks was recently selected as part of a committee, regional committee, that reviews the Cape history syllabus. The next syllabus should come out when?
the middle of August,
Okay.
2026.
So when she was selected to sit on the committee, she reached out to me and we met and put together ideas. So now the current Cape history syllabus is a very good syllabus, okay? It covers indigenous history before the Europeans, Caribbean, African societies, early contact with Europe. One of the suggestions that is being put forward is to more study of African societies before the slave trade. So that is a proposal that is being put forward from the Singis Nevis end. So yeah, that we're working on.
One of the things we have to be mindful of, the Cape syllabus covers what we will call, which is more indigenous to the Caribbean region. We have to be mindful that there are different branches of history. And so I said to persons, if you wish to study history, you need to find out what type of history you would like to study. Because far too often people think that history is just European history, African history, the slave trade, indigenous people, indentured servants. There is history where you just study religion, or you study one aspect of religion. There is history where you do economic history, and it might be just a particular aspect of that. And whenever a book is written in relation to history, you have to be mindful of the writer, the author, because a lot of times the book mirrors basically the ideas of the author. And that is where persons who do analysis in terms of reviewing books, this is where it is important for us to understand who is writing, the voice they're writing through, and how we see things within our region. So I always say to persons, you need to choose what type of history, because you could study the history of women, and maybe you just study the history of indigenous women, or maybe the role of women in the emancipation process, or the role of women in the protests of the 1930s. So history is so vast, so wide, it comes with so many tentacles that we don't even know exactly who all is studying, what they're studying. Sometimes it is difficult to pin down all of it, and it cannot be fit into the CSEC or the Cape syllabus as one topic. So we touch on different areas.
Also, history is being made every day, okay? Let me give an example. So, as part of Unit 2 for Cape History, we look at the Russian Revolution, First World War, Second World War. it is conceivable that 40 or 50 years from now, Cape history students are going to be studying the war in Ukraine. Okay? And what's happening in Iran. History is being made every day. Today's headlines, tomorrow's history.
Everyone.
Good evening.
Okay, I have more of a comment. Well, I want to also thank the CFBC and Dr. Gill for such a tremendous experience, and I truly look forward to the future lectures. And the second part of the topic says lessons from our ancestors. So I'm encouraging those of us who are here and you have access to your parents, your aunts, your grandparents, whomever, to sit with them as you did with Mr. Salters and get that information, learn those lessons, make notes, record it, however it is, because as we, the younger generation, grow and the older generation passes, some of them are passing with their knowledge, some of them are passing with their experiences, their understanding, and their insight that we would not be privy to. So I encourage everyone here, whoever it is in your family or neighbors or whoever, but there is just so much that we can learn from our elders that will help us in the future. And then when we learn, we become the elders eventually, and the cycle continues. And that is the best way to preserve our history, because we have to tell our own stories, and it is in passing down of these lessons, these experiences, we can develop ourselves as a people. So I just wanted to encourage everybody to just get that ball rolling so that we can hone in on these lessons that we can learn from our elders. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
One more person.
Yeah, a brief comment before we take the last person. Oral history is one of my areas of specialty. So I completely agree with you. I always say this. When an elder dies, it's the equivalent of a library burning down. Because if somebody does not sit with them and get that information, that knowledge goes with them. Okay? So that is extreme. And I would say for us Caribbean people, for African descendant people, oral history is even more important. There's a parable about the hunt. It's written from the perspective of the hunter. The hunter leaves his manor in England or France or wherever, goes to Africa, shoots the lion, takes the head and mounts it as a trophy on his wall, and then has his friends over in the evening drinking a Scotch whiskey, smoking the pipes, and he's this brave hunter who killed this savage beast. But the reality is, the hunter left where he was, went into the lion's territory, threatened that lion that was only trying to protect their family. Okay? Now, if that hunter stole from this perspective of the lion, it would be a completely different story, okay? That is our history that was written during the colonial times. So that is why, to come back to my lecture, we are taught to be ashamed of slavery because, our ancestors sold slaves too. But the people who wrote the books didn't tell that their ancestors were Nazis. Okay? So oral history is important because it plays a role in correcting a lot of the history that a lot of the quote-unquote official histories. Thank you for that.
Hi, good night, everyone.
Good night, another former student.
It has indeed been a pleasure to be here to listen to another lecture of Mr. Gill. And I've also been a student of Ms. Brooks for history, Cape Unit 1 and 2. And there were definitely some passionate lectures. They changed the way that I analyze past events and how it has affected current events in society. And I'd like to share a question based on my interpretation of while sitting here thinking about the quote, rise up together or sink separately. Often in our society, the youth are marginalized and their voices aren't given much importance. Not saying that all the time, but in often cases when a youth speaks up, it is seen as though they are talking back or something in that sense. So what can we do to proactively enlighten and empower the youth?
Good question. Good question. Yeah. All voices should be listened to. One observation I have made, right, here, and I'm going to speak another uncomfortable truth. I have noticed that some people only have time for the youth once every 5 years. Yeah? I'm going to say it as She knows I'm almost as blunt as my colleague, Miss Brooks. Almost. No, that's true. A lot of times, we don't have time for the youth once every 5 years. And you know what? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay? So yeah, their voices need to be heard. One of the reasons why I'm passionate about teaching history, because as I said earlier, I am confident that one of my students is going to be a next Prime Minister, or maybe even the next OECS Secretary General, or this CARICOM Secretary General. And you don't know how that influence that they had from being in Miss Brooks and my class, how that could influence them in shaping policy. Okay? So we need to invest in the youth because they are our future. Okay? When we are fertilizing the grass across the road there, or when we are pushing a stroller in a rocking chair, they're the ones who we are going to be depending on to carry our society forward, okay? Our ancestors did not let us down. Let us not let our youth down. We need to carry the torch to them and prepare them fully and respect their voices, hear them. I mean, I'm not a perfect teacher, far from it. But Denise and Jared could tell you that I love to encourage debate in class. And I get annoyed when I teach a whole lecture and nobody got no questions. They could tell you that. I like, you know? So I always encourage people to ask questions because I don't see a class as just me going to bang on my mouth. Okay? Because I can learn from you as well. Okay? A lot of times, a student asks me a question in class, and that sends me on a rabbit hole to do research on something. Okay? So it is a two-way street. So more of us need to listen to them, not just when it becomes politically convenient. Okay? But hear their voices, because they have even more at stake, you know. Okay? If my generation is lucky, if we are lucky, we have 3 or 4 more decades of good health and life. But whatever policies are made by a government today, they stand to benefit from it more if it's a good policy, but they also stand to suffer more if it's a bad policy. Exactly. Exactly. So we need to hear them because they have even more at stake as the future stakeholders. So good point, Nanisi.
Good evening, everyone. I have been attending these lectures from practically the inception, and I want to commend Mr. Nita Daniel, who has been spearheading this event, and I've thoroughly enjoyed every one I've attended. I also very much enjoyed Dr. Gill's presentation tonight, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tatum. Allow me to acknowledge my former co-worker at the Immaculate Conception Catholic School and our well-known poet and playwright, Mr. Lachlan Tatum.
I think that is it.
Okay, I think we're
right.
approaching the end. I think we had one more, and then 2 more. Sorry, there's a lady in the front, and then we're wrapping.
Yeah, I would like to add something because I realize we talk about the Buckley's Uprising, but we don't see a lot of people don't come and honor the ancestors of the Buckley's Uprising. And I of the Naya Bingi Tiako Siada, we play this physical stage tonight to say every year on the 28th of January we go up by our ancestors and pay homage to them. And we know much people here don't know come out like that and give that honor, to give that reference of what we're speaking of here tonight, of the sacrifice that had made. And it's a shame that we see after the proclamation was signed by those criminals we call plantocracy orders, have brought our people to 1834, and 101 years after, our forebears them said enough is enough, and stand to have a labor unrest. And to this day, we still see these political parties don't have the guns to say, let us make something be honorable to the great sacrifice. We not take care who political party leading them because we don't look for the favoritism, but the honor must be respected to those who lay the blade in trade to where we're standing on today. You make the reference of that in your lecture, and we're seeing these things not primitively living by the people we're surrounded by in this society. So we don't have no fear to honor these people who we call our ancestors of the Buckley's Uprising, and even like we talk about of where we have in 1896, because think is shaped studies of history even earlier than what the colonial people them said again in 1625. Give thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Oyo.
One more, and then we will close off.
I promise a very brief. Yes. Okay. Very brief.
Very, very brief. Just to totally agree with your point about and the difference between being learned and being enlightened. And you don't have to be an intellectual to be enlightened.
Exactly.
And it really hinges on what Sojourner Truth said. When you know that she would have delivered, you know, but if it's hundreds or over a couple thousand people from slavery. And she said she could have delivered so much more if only they knew they were slaves. Right? And it's in that spirit I just want to put a plug that the enlightened among us, I want us to rise up in a sense of a citizen force of the enlightened to work and advocate on all of the issues that we spoke of, whether it's erecting a monument, whether it's teaching history. To join, please, we are open for recruitment. It's an unlimited committee. We can have any vast number. So if you're interested in joining the only advocacy group right now around these types of issues in the Federation, both on St. Kitts and Nevis, please do give me a call and you can become part of the Roots of Enslaved Peoples Committee of UNESCO.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
I think that is it. Dr. Gill? Dr. Gill, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
you.
Thank to all of you for coming. Thanks for the feedback, the support, etc.
All right. I will end by saying, I will use the words of George Orwell from the book 1984. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. And it was Professor Justin Robinson of the University of the West Indies who said, no one is coming to save us, which is why we must build ourselves. And it comes right back to rise up together or sink separately. Lessons of our ancestors. Thank you, Dr. Gill. I will now call Mrs. Daniel to make a presentation and to also give the vote of thanks. You want me take it up? Take out the gift? Take out the ID? Okay.
This is Dr. Gill's, the book which was co-authored by Dr. Cameron Gill. Let us give him a round of applause.
Just a quick thing. If you're interested, there's an online site named Lulu. Similar to Amazon, LU. So if you go on Lulu, on the homepage, type in the search bar, Sandy Point Archaeology, and you will find the book. Thank you. You're welcome.
Dr. Gill, it gives me great pleasure on behalf of the Clarence Fitzroy Ryan College to present to you this gift,
Thank you.
which represents our great appreciation of the excellent and passionate delivery you did tonight. You lived up to my expectations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to say, thank you for your support for the library services. Whenever I call you, you always answer. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Daniel. Please give Mrs. Daniel a round of applause. To have an annual Emancipation lecture being held by our flagship education institution in the Federation. This is her brainchild, so she should be, lauded for it.
Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen, our guests, friends. As we bring this remarkable launch of our Emancipation Observance to a close, our hearts are full, our minds are enriched, and our spirits are lifted. An evening of this magnitude does not happen in isolation. It is a result of collective effort collaboration, and unwavering dedication. On behalf of the college, it is my absolute privilege to express our profound gratitude to everyone who made this evening a success. First and foremost, to our knowledgeable and passionate keynote speaker, Dr. Cameron Gill. Thank you for delivering Thank you for delivering a masterclass in Caribbean and world history and contemporary responsibility. You did not merely speak to us, you challenged us to look backward, forward, inward, and outward. You moved us, and you reminded us of the urgent imperative behind the words, rise up together or sink separately. Your message will echo in this hall and beyond these walls long after tonight. Our sincere gratitude goes to, let us give Dr. Gill another round of applause. Our sincere gratitude goes to Ms. Laverne M. Brooks for serving so ably as our Master of Ceremonies. She kept our program running skillfully. Thank you for assisting also with the exhibition, which was mounted on the balcony, which I hope we all enjoyed. Ms. Brooks, thank you for your steadfast, long-standing support for the library services. Whenever we reach out, you're always there to answer our call. To our college leadership, Dr. Moya Rotham and Ms. Wanda Hughes, thank you for your endorsement of this Emancipation observance. By supporting this initiative, you have affirmed our college's commitment to fostering critical thought, cultural pride, and historical scholarship. We extend our profound gratitude to Mrs. Carissa Kelly, Registrar, for her steadfast oversight of the college and her invaluable leadership in making this inaugural event a resounding success. Let us warm our hands. Bringing together the many moving parts of a landmark occasion like this is no small feat. Yet her guidance over the past week, just 1 week, ensured that everything came together very well. Thank you, Mrs. Kelly, for your extraordinary support and for demonstrating that together we can truly achieve great things here at CFBC. Together, we can also achieve great things here in St. Kitts and Nevis and beyond. Once again, let's warm our hearts to Mrs. Kelly. To the Department of Cultural Heritage, headed by Mr. Pierre Liebert, we extend our deepest appreciation for partnering with us for providing the live drumming performance by Spirit Drummers. The drum beats preceding the lecture honored our ancestors and set a powerful sacred tone for the evening. Thank you, Mr. Pierre Liebert. He's always a willing partner. To our generous lender, Mr. Stephen Tyrrell of Hanley's Road, who trusted us with his precious artifacts on display, we want to say a hearty thank you. To the college ICT department, headed by Mr. Kendall Cable, thank you for your technical support. In an era when physical and digital boundaries blur, your work with the audiovisual equipment and live stream ensure that our message reached not only those in this room, but also viewers across the nation and the diaspora. I know I received many text messages, and they were all the viewers online. I know at one point there were about 40, almost 50 viewers at one point, and I've received many glowing remarks from commendations, Dr. Gill, from to our marketing division, especially Miss Novelette Benjamin, also the President's Office, the Education Media Unit, the Ministry of Ecclesiastical and Faith-Based Affairs, and our churches. Thank you for carrying our message across the airwaves and digital platforms and into our churches. Your efforts ensured that our community knew this event was taking place and felt welcome to join us. Thank you, Mrs. Elrita Simpson Brown. To the CFBC Facilities and Operations team, to everyone who worked tirelessly between the scenes, setting up this conference room, arranging seating, and ensuring the physical space was welcoming and secure. Your hard work was the foundation upon which tonight rested. To our dedicated library staff, assisted with a variety of tasks, the exhibition also, your kind assistance made this inaugural lecture a reality and a success. To you, our audience, our students, I see Kayla here tonight. She's always my willing helper. Please stand, Kayla. And Framer, the incoming president of the student government, please stand to be recognized. And one of our debaters, please stand. I've forgotten your name, but yes. They're always willing to help with library initiatives. We are happy that you are here to represent our student body this evening. Thank you, audience, for filling this room, for your keen attention, your show of appreciation, and for your thoughtful engagement during the question and answer segment. You are the reason why we do this. Please accept our profound gratitude. As we depart tonight, let us carry the ancestral lessons of unity, creativity, courage, resilience in our hearts and minds, and also apply them. We look forward to welcoming you all back next year for the second annual Emancipation Lecture. Thank you. Travel home safely. Good night.
And thank you for coming, and have a wonderful evening. Traveling mercies. Thank you.